What's good, everybody? Welcome back to Brain Slush TV. Thank y'all so much for coming through, and welcome to the first episode of Throwback Ave. This is a series that I've really been wanting to get off the ground for quite some time. I did kind of have sort of a test run a couple of years ago, but it didn't come out the way that I would have liked. It was just me experimenting, but nonetheless, man, I'm glad to finally, do this again, because the whole idea of the series is to talk about nostalgia, right? Things that I experienced growing up, memories, when it comes to video games, movies, going to arcades, maybe hanging out with friends, my cousins, going to certain places like Target when they used to have the popcorn, Kmart, stuff like that, like things in that nature. But I'm going to try to break it up into different parts so it's not, all cluttered. I want to make sure that each episode there's a topic. So fingers crossed that it's good and y'all enjoy it. So this episode is going to be about the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. All right. And the reason why I chose this as episode 1 was because it's going to be quick. I don't have much memories or nostalgia for the console. There's some here and there, but I'll get into that right now. But I didn't know really anybody who had one. I certainly didn't. The closest person that I can say did were my older cousins, and that was when I would go to my grandma's house when I was younger, and they never really played the NES. I've only seen it turned on maybe once or twice that I could remember, but the times that it was on, I thought it was pretty cool. Most of my pop culture experiences, whether it be video games and movies and music, all took place at my grandma's house. So that's going to be like a reoccurring thing in this series, is my grandma's house. All right, so just if you want to play a game and count how many times I say grandma's house, go right ahead. I don't know what you'll win at the end, but that's just going to be something that's going to be said a lot. So we spent a lot of time at my grandma's house when we were kids, just because my mom was really close to her mom. So we would always go over there, right? And I didn't mind so much, because it wasn't like how most people, I guess, grandma's place would be, where it's just, I'm an older lady living by herself. No, I had cousins who lived there with her. So when I went, there was always life. There was always some sort of entertainment going on. You know what I mean? Going outside to play soccer or basketball, kick the ball around, just run around the neighborhood, typical kid stuff. Part of the fun was the fact that they had a Super Nintendo. Now, I'm not going to get into the SNES because that's just a whole nother episode that requires a lot more thought, because I have so much more to say about it than the NES. Like I had mentioned, my cousins did not play the NES, not because they didn't like it, but I think they were so occupied with the SNES that the NES just seemed obsolete. Like it was an old man system, right? I would usually just sit there and watch my cousins play. They never really passed the sticks to me, or controller. We used to call it sticks back then, but they never really passed the controller to me. Not because, they didn't like me or anything, but I was a kid. I was 5 years old. I was the youngest of the bunch. So a 5-6-year-old compared to 10, 11, 12 years old who are playing games, who are probably so much better at it, they're not going to risk losing a game, to some freaking little kid who has no idea what he's doing. I didn't own a home console at this time. The closest thing I guess I got to a game console was the Game Boy, and I got that probably 94, 95 during Christmas. But anyway, since the Super Nintendo was getting all the glory, the NES was just sitting on this dresser gathering up dust in my grandma's room. I mean, it was like this old-fashioned dresser, and on top of it was this old dial CRT, and connected to that CRT was the NES. And I remember kind of seeing it there, but I never paid it no mind. In my little kid brain, because I didn't know how to distinguish the two, I assumed that was the same console as the one that was in my cousin's room, right? And the only thing that I can think of was that nobody played this one because that one belonged to my grandma, and nobody was being able to touch it, right? And I wouldn't even dare to go in there to turn it on, because I mean, when you're a kid, you're taught right away, you don't go into anybody's room, you don't go into anybody's belongings without their permission. So my grandma's room was off limits, so I didn't pay no mind. The console was sitting up there, and that was it. And it wasn't until one day that we went over and the NES was connected to the living room TV. Now, when I seen it, like actually up close, I realized that it looks so much different than the one that's in the room. So my mind, I'm trying to figure it out, right? And I still coming to the conclusion that these two things are the same. Obviously, I was wrong. One is 8-bit, one is 16-bit, right? But in my kid mind, who cares? It's a video game console. So if I can turn the dials of my memory, I can kind of see what was on the TV. And the first thought that comes to my mind that my cousin was playing was Friday the 13th. Now, I had no idea what Friday the 13th was. I don't know who Jason was. I just knew that you were playing a character who was going through these campgrounds and zombies were coming out of the ground. You threw like little rocks at them and eventually you get little knives. And, you know, that was it. But I remember sitting there just watching him, you know, go through this game. I don't know if he ever beat it or not, but I didn't even bother to ask questions. I just sat there and just watched. And it was so cool. It was kind of an interesting experience because I started to notice the difference in graphics and gameplay, and then looking at him play with the controller, and now I was starting to distinguish the two, right? I was starting to see, okay, this one seems old, that one seems new, but it didn't matter to me because it was a video game. For me, even to this day, I don't care to play any type of video game. If it's an Atari, if it's a PS5 game, it doesn't matter, because like the little kid in me looks at these games and I'm like, you know what? This is video game. This is part of video game culture, of history. So if I can play a game like, I don't know, Hero on the 2600, I'll probably enjoy that a whole lot more than something that's on the PS5. But as I'm watching him play this game, you know, I obviously look down and I see a little stack of games. And I'm kind of going through it and I'm seeing like, oh, this is pretty interesting. This looks cool. And again, if I can turn the dial of my brain, I can kind of remember what those games were. I want to say there was Super Mario Brothers 2, Tetris, Dr. Mario, which, you know, I'll get into that right now because my grandma loved that game. Home Alone 2, Ghosts and Goblins, and fuck, I don't even remember. Yoshi. And obviously there's a theme there, which is puzzle games, Yoshi, Dr. Mario, Tetris. My grandma loved that kind of stuff. Now, I did get a chance to play the NES and the Super Nintendo when I was over there. Sometimes it just depended on how my cousins were feeling, or if they didn't even care to play the game, they just, you know, gave me the stick and were like, here, go ahead and play. But I think my first soiree into the NES was Ghosts and Goblins. Obviously, it probably looked something like this. I was getting my ass handed to me, maybe. I can't tell you my first, you know, initial thoughts, like, oh my gosh, I'm losing or whatever. It didn't come to mind. But you can only imagine that it was bad. But obviously, me as a kid, again, I had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't really care whether I was winning or losing. I was just getting a chance to play this game. To this day, I can't get very far like many of the NES games because I just suck at them. But one game I would see often being played was Dr. Mario, and you would think like, oh, your cousins really like that game. No, you don't understand. This was my grandma's joint. All right, Dr. Mario was, I don't know what it is. You know how like there was this thing where they sold the Game Boy, that's why they had Tetris as a pack-in. They were able to sell it to a wider audience because not only kids liked, you know, being able to play Tetris, but older folks too, business people, people who owned businesses. You know, like it was like a wide range in demographic and culture. Everyone loved Tetris, and I'm sure Dr. Mario is the same kind of way. Because like once my grandma threw on Dr. Mario, you know she was going to be on for quite a while. And she got damn. You know, it's funny because growing up, my grandma has a track record of playing video games, you know, to a certain extent. The first time I ever seen her play a game was obviously with Dr. Mario. But as I got older and the internet started to come around, she would play games on there like, you know, she would do slots or she would do certain card games. I don't know if it was solitaire, poker, whatever. But there was one game in particular. I don't remember the website, but this game was just popping balloons. It was like this little cactus character, and you just pop the colors in a certain order, these balloons in a certain like pattern or order. It was interesting. It didn't look all that fun, you know, when you think about it, but it just was a way to kill time. A very cool pick up and play type of game. But back to Dr. Mario, I just loved watching my grandma play games because you didn't see older folks all that often play video games, right? My mom certainly didn't. It's not that she didn't want to. I just think that it just wasn't of her interest. You know, my mom was more interested in movies. She was more interested in, you know, doing crochet work or you know, like certain other things. Like she was more interested in real life stuff than playing video games, you know what I mean? So, and she was always busy, so she never really had the time to do it. But it was cool seeing an adult doing stuff that kids love to do. That was my grandma, man, the virus killer. But pretty much that was my basic memories of the NES that I could remember. I know, like I said, it's going to be a short video. It's nothing very interesting, nothing like, oh wow, you know, but that's just what I can think of, man. I was a little kid, all right? And in my 20s, I didn't do myself any favors by, you know, none of that stuff. So kids out there, don't do that, because your memories are precious, and don't kill it with drugs and alcohol.
Message!
No, but seriously, the NES is a fun console. Just like the Atari 2600, when I really want to go back in time and try out games that were way before my existence, of course, and, you know, try something that's part of gaming history. And that's the reason why I have the series GINP, because there's a lot of these games that I never got to play. So be sure to check the playlist below for that. But most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, I would love to hear your memories, your thoughts, what it was like being there when the NES first dropped, what it was like getting a game for the first time. You know, those are the kind of things that I love reading. If we can fill the comment section up with those kind of things, I will sit back and just, you know, sip some coffee and read those, man. I just love responding to those and listening to people's experience, especially when it comes to video games. But muchas gracias for coming through and checking out episode 1 of Throwback Ave. It's much appreciated. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, smash that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more of this content as I got dropping soon. And yes, hopefully it wasn't too boring for y'all. So muchas gracias once again, fam, and I will catch y'all in the next one. All right, deuce.